Wonderful. Good evening. My name is Terry Eichel, and I work with the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network. We are a faith-based environmental group in Connecticut. I hope you had a wonderful holiday weekend. It is rare and quite special to have the holidays of Ramadan, Passover, and Easter on the same weekend. Together with Universalist Church of West Hartford, Asylum Hill Congregational Church, and Congregation Beth Israel, I want to welcome you to our webinar called How to Bring Electric School Buses to Your Community. I would like to open first with IREJN's Land Acknowledgement Statement. We acknowledge that Connecticut, Algonquin for land on the Tidal River, is the traditional home of Mohegans, Pequots, and many other tribes. We are grateful for our Native people's care for their home and will strive to preserve it for the next 7 generations. This webinar is an outgrowth from our February webinar, How to Be an Effective Advocate for Climate Justice. During that webinar, we proposed 2 eco-justice actions that congregations could take. The first was becoming a champion for electric school buses, and the second eco-justice action was becoming a champion for home energy efficiency. Our home energy efficiency webinar is next Monday, April 25th at 7 p.m., and we hope you sign up for that one too. We are very pleased to be able to offer Spanish interpretation for this webinar. This is the 3rd webinar, I believe, but I would still like to give you brief instructions on how to select Spanish as your language. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see a globe with the word interpretation. Click on that, and from there, choose Spanish. In the same box, choose Mute Original Audio. I would like to offer special thanks to our sponsors for this evening. This webinar is made possible through the support of Lynn and John Fulkerson and Barbara Edelstein. I would also like to thank Sabina Shelby, Mally Cox-Chapman, and Ted Lowenthal for their tireless energy and commitment to helping create these webinars. Sorry, Ted, there was a little typo in there. I am pleased to welcome our presenter, Daphne Dixon from Live Green, Connecticut. But first, I would like to have Mally Cox-Chapman just say some words of welcome.
Hello, all you wonderful people who have decided to take your Monday evening and devote it to climate change. The Canadians have a word for you. Most Americans are in what they would call the movable middle. They have decided out of hopelessness or helplessness that there's nothing to be done. But you as a group and individually have decided to move off the movable middle and become a climate change activist. And I salute you for being here. Our hope is that by the end of this evening and by next Monday's evening, that you will have found a path by which you can take action and create impact in climate change. We're delighted that you are here.
Thank you so much, Mally. So I'd like to introduce Daphne Dixon. And after Daphne's presentation, we're going to have a moderated question and answer session. So please put your questions in the chat or the Q&A. Here we go, Daphne Dixon. Daphne is one of the co-founders of Live Green Connecticut, which she began in 2010 with Scott Weicker. Daphne has been bringing people together around environmental causes for over a decade. Since 2010, Daphne and Live Green Connecticut have brought together over 15,000 community members, task forces, business leaders, nonprofit organizations, and municipal leaders at over 200 workshops, events, and festivals throughout the state. Highlights include the Resilient Connecticut Workshop at Yale and Fairfield University, and Green Drinks networking events, Help a Neighbor Out Solar Campaign, Fairfield County Sustainable Communities Reception, Energy Management Workshops, and the Green Fair Business Expo. Their signature event, Live Green Connecticut Family Festival, held at Taylor Farm Park in Norwalk the 3rd week of September from 2010 to 2015, brought together a variety of people from throughout the state. Thousands were provided with environmental education and the opportunity to learn from each other in an open and friendly setting. Highlights included delicious local food, great music, and hundreds of sustainability exhibitors. Live Green Connecticut has a rafter of impressive environmental programs, and we're pleased to talk about their their electric school bus program tonight. Daphne,
All right.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you can take it away.
All right. I am so excited to be here this evening. I really want to thank Sabina and Mally and Ted and Terry for this incredible opportunity to share with you information about electric school buses and to hear from you. So before I put up the screen, I am going to encourage you to put into chat what town you're in, what town you're from, so we can kind of all see where everybody's from. And I just really want to invite you into a very rich conversation tonight about electric school buses. So I know we're all so busy with everything we do, taking care of children and elders and work and all kinds of things. And it's such a busy time of year with the holidays. And I'm just so grateful to have this special time with you. So I'm just going to invite you to put everything to one side for this 1 hour and to really sort of sink into what I like to call here at Live Green Connecticut extraordinary awareness. And an extraordinary awareness of what's in potential, for you, for me, for our schools, for our towns, for our state, and what does it really mean for you to be here tonight? What called you to come to this webinar about electric school buses? What is it about electric school buses that you feel that somehow you could be a part of and supportive of? So I thank you for your time and your attention, and I really look forward to hearing your questions after we get into it a little bit. So I'm going to now I'm going to share my screen and we will get into the presentation. All right, let's see. Oh, let me just start at the beginning. Now I'm showing you everything. Let's see. All right. Here we go. All right, here we are at the beginning. So welcome to becoming an electric school bus champion and learning how to build an electric school bus team. So as Terry said, we've been pretty busy the last 10 or 12 years doing a lot of different things. But what I have to say is really filled me up the most is working on these electric school bus projects. And I think the thing that calls me to it so much is, I see those little children getting onto I live right around the street from a grammar school, and those little children, and the buses, they pull up and those little children are there and they're just inhaling that poisonous emissions. And it's just so terrible, really, that they're exposed to that. And not only are the children exposed to that, but all of us really are exposed to that. So without really knowing that much technically about electric school buses and not really knowing, 3 years ago, I really didn't know anything about how to do this work. I kind of just jumped in, and so can you. So more than any other program we do, the electric school bus program is really the one that means the most to me. It doesn't only mean the most to me, it also means an awful lot to Connecticut Deep. So they put together a Connecticut roadmap, which supports a lot of different electrification projects. So again, it's not just me who wants to do electrification, it's Connecticut Deep. It's also 14 other states in the District of Columbia, along with Connecticut, who signed a memorandum of understanding that commits us to electrify 30% of our buses and trucks by 2030. So, how are we going to do that? So it's really going to take, as they say, a village to do that. So it's quite a lot to do to bring the electric school bus projects to fruition. But in the last 2 years, we've worked with so many school districts and service providers and school districts. And in some ways, we feel like we sort of cracked the code on the process of how to work together with people and put together these electric school bus teams and really get someplace. So kind of just to give you some real numbers on this, if we were to get 30% of our buses, our electric school buses, electrified by 2030, this is what the numbers look like. So, it kind of just puts it into perspective when you see that, we really need to get moving on this, or we're not going to make these commitments. So not only, do we have these, commitments with the other states, we've got Connecticut Deep, very dedicated to this. I think at some level, we all really know that there really is this moral imperative that we know in our hearts that we want to do something. We want to. We're all called to make the world a better place. And the atmosphere we live in, it doesn't go on forever. When we look up at the sky on a beautiful summer day and it's bright blue, it looks like it goes forever, but it really doesn't. And the breathable air that we have is really pretty thin. And, every day we're putting these toxins into this air. So it's just so important that we, take a step back and really look at what we're doing to our air and see, what part can we play? How can we really work together to make a difference? Because when we don't do something and we don't help do these projects, we have such a risk of more children getting asthma, all of these terrible health of risks that come along with these fumes from these buses, asthma rates and so many other things. So it's not just like a nice thing or a nice idea to want to have electric school buses. It's actually in everybody's best interest because of all the risks that are posed when we don't do something, to this air quality. Connecticut has some of the worst air quality in the country. So this is a lot, right? So there's kind of this feeling of I don't know how to do this, or somebody else should be doing this. Like, shouldn't the school districts be doing this, or shouldn't the school bus providers be doing this, or I don't know enough. I don't have a technical background. Everyone sort of is thinking, isn't there somebody else who should be doing this? Working on these projects and getting the ball rolling. And in some cases, nobody else is going to be coming to start these projects except for a community champion. So it's just, I ask you to consider yourself, a champion, and at whatever level you would potentially want to participate, a little bit or a lot. I just want you to consider what part you could play. And instead of thinking, well, it's this person's role or that person's role or the school district, really identifying as a leader. So the way it started with me was I was working with a group of people and we were putting together this event, the Green Wheels Expo. And somebody mentioned, I think that White Plains has electric school buses. I think they just got some electric school buses. And I thought, oh my gosh, really? So I called up the White Plains School District. I didn't know these people. I just called them up and I said, hey, we're doing this community event and we're going to have electric vehicles. And we've heard that you've got electric school buses. And what would it take for you to bring your school bus to our event? We would just love to have one of your school buses on display. And lucky for me, I was talking with the fleet manager at White Plains School District, who is crazier about electric school buses than I am, if you can imagine. And he said, we would love to bring our electric school bus to your event and show it off. So the range on a Lion electric bus that they had was 60 miles. It's not very much range. And we were 45 miles away. But we had a charging station at our site, and they they said, fine, we'll bring the bus and we'll charge it and we'll drive back. So what was really magical was they brought the bus, and we had invited different members of the Board of Ed and from the school district. And when the school district fleet manager, he had his 2 little boys with him, he took a tour of the bus. He was, stepping up on the bus, and it's a really cool bus. And his 2 little boys were with him. And so they're getting on the bus, and the 2 little boys look up at the operations manager of the school fleet, and they said, "Dad, how come we don't have buses like this?" And so we had them right there. So at that moment, the school bus fleet manager for the school district was like, okay, I'm all in. And so it was just in that moment where he, it just took him getting on the bus and his kids looking at him saying, why don't we have these buses? And it kind of all clicked. And there was other boards, there was other Board of Education members there, and they all kind of had this same experience. The other thing that was pretty amazing that happened at that event was that I had a little table set up to talk about electric school buses, even though I'm telling you at that point, I kind of didn't really know very much about them, but that really didn't stop me because I wanted to just talk to other people to find out if they had an interest in them. So I had this little table set up, are you interested in electric school buses? And we had like 5 or 6 people sign up to come to what we called the Electric School Bus Alliance. And so this group met, for several weeks to talk about electric school buses and to share what we knew and what we, saw in potential. And it was actually that group, that little Electric School Bus Alliance, those 5 of us that met for several weeks, that group actually ended up turning into the seeds of our electric school bus toolkit and boot camps, and has led to everything. And it all started with that one person saying, I think White Plains has electric school buses, and me just picking up the phone and calling them. So it's really as simple as that sometimes, just to get started. So, we don't have to know all the answers when we start doing electric school bus work. All we have to do is be curious and be willing to learn. And, everybody on this call is a leader, or you wouldn't be here. I'm a leader, you're a leader, we're all leaders. And that's really what it takes. And it takes a team of leaders with a shared vision to get these projects done. So we had this event, the Regional Conference of Sustainable Development. So this is just another example how it's just amazing what gets sparked when people are in conversation. So we had this panel, and we had our friend from White Plains, Sergio Alfonso, and we had our friend from the school district that got on the bus. And then we had a few other folks, and Andrea here on our team led the this panel discussion. And they all were sharing about, the electric school buses. And right after this panel, one of the people in the audience, there was a huge table of utility people there at the meeting. And in White Plains, it was the utility that basically funded the whole project. It was the utility that funded the project. And one of the community members went over to this huge table of utility, Connecticut utility people, and said, White Plains is doing this, what can you do? Why are, how can the utilities help? And then that actually led to a whole string of meetings, and still as a project that's in the process. But it just goes to show you, it's like working on these projects is actually really fun. And it just starts, like I said, like by curiosity and somebody having a question in their mind, and then, taking that next step. So what does an electric school bus team, look like, and who's really on it? So, ideally when we have these, what we call electric school bus teams, it's really important to have a community champion. Community champions we'll get into that later, but play a very important role. The school bus fleet director, so that's somebody at the school district. And then you've got somebody from finance is usually on there, school board members. You can or can't, you don't always have to have somebody from the utility and the service provider. They're all part of the team. Then Clean Cities or other nonprofit organizations can help as well. But you really want to have a team of people working on these projects. Let's see. So now we're going to talk just briefly about the economics, because probably a lot of you are thinking, well, aren't these school buses awfully expensive? I've heard that they're 3 times the price of regular buses. Well, that they are, and that is why there's funding. And just talking about funding is a whole nother webinar and more. But I just want you to know that there is funding coming, and there is actually an EPA grant that will be released probably the beginning of June, end of May, beginning of June. And so there is definitely funding that is coming, and there's other funding opportunities as well, but this EPA one is quite a rich opportunity. So becoming an electric school bus champion can mean whatever you want it to mean. It can mean that you just work on it a little bit, and then that's all. You could dedicate yourself for 6 months. You could come and go. There's not really like a one size fits all to be an electric school bus champion. It really all is dependent on what you want to do, and whether it's a little bit or a lot, it's all good, and it's all really valuable. So when you're part of one of these teams, things to consider if it's right for you. Do you like to be a part of a team? Do you like to work collaboratively with others? Do you enjoy seeing a shared vision and then working with others to fulfill upon that shared vision? Do you like to do what's right? Do you like to feel like you're contributing to make this a better world? Do you see life with obstacles, or do you see life with problems to be solved? So whether we're getting electric school buses or buying a new house or whatever we're doing, navigating things at work or navigating traffic, there's always problems to be solved. And so coming to an electric school bus project with an open heart and a glad heart and a positive attitude is pretty essential. And then somebody, persistent in staying the course. And for some people, you might just jump in and do a little bit of work, and then that's on the project, and then maybe you have other obligations, and that's fine. But for the project to go to fruition, there is a persistence in staying the course that is essential. Not that everybody has to do the whole, the whole 9 yards. All right. So what the electric school bus champion, some of the most important things that a champion, having a little problem with my PowerPoint. It was just so excited to get to the next slide. But the role of the electric school bus champion in a lot of ways is just to provide encouragement to the school board, encouragement to the school district. You're all members of your community. You might know the folks at the school district. You might have children still in school. You might be a Board of Ed member or know Board of Ed members. So providing encouragement, information. There's an opportunity to participate in electric school bus demos like the one that we did that I talked about earlier. Facilitating meetings. So if you're talking to somebody at the Board of Ed, but they have questions and they want to learn more about electric school buses, potentially setting with, would always be here to help. So potentially setting up a meeting with a Board of Ed person and maybe a school bus manufacturer to learn more about, the buses, and then to provide everybody with information about grants, because everybody always wants to know, how are we going to pay for this? And how would you find out about grants? Well, I would tell you. I will tell you everything you need to know. So again, you would potentially contact Board of Ed members, although you don't have to if you don't want to. And again, all of, participating in an electric school bus team, it's all about what feels right and good to you. So we never want anybody to feel like they have to do something. It's always, what is the most natural way for you to participate? So whatever your natural gifts and talents are is what you would bring to your team. Another good group to contact, and maybe some of you are in this group as well. I know I'm a task force member in my town, but many of the towns have these task forces, energy task forces, and a lot of times folks on the energy task force you can get them involved and get them to help as well. Another thing that team members can do, champions can do, is to find out when your current contract is up. That's a little bit down the line, but that's that's a great piece of information to know. And probably one of the most important things you can do when you're on a team is just read and learn about other successful projects. It's really motivating and inspiring to hear about these projects. There's hundreds of electric school buses all over the country. So all the service providers have electric school buses. Although it's new, these projects are pretty much everywhere. So we've got the community members, champions, which are you. We've got organizations like Live Green and Clean Cities that can help support, finding information. We've got the fleet managers, we've got the Board of Ed, and we have our service providers. So those are really the members of the team that we need to be successful. All right. So I'm just going to go over this kind of briefly. I don't want to lose you in the middle of the presentation. So the reason the Board of Ed is so important, I'll just kind of say the top line here. You probably know, you may not, maybe not everybody knows. So in Connecticut, we have service providers that the school contracts with. So the school contracts with service providers like First Student, like STA, like DATCO, and those contracts need to be approved by the Board of Education. So the Board of Education is really critical in this, because if they don't like electric school buses, but the service provider wants to bring electric school buses in, a Board of Ed can not agree to that contract. The fleet manager, so those are the people that work at the school district. So at White Plains, it was Sergio Alfonso. Sergio Alfonso is probably the reason that school has those electric school buses, because he was so excited and supportive, and he would do anything he could to talk to the Board of Ed or the service providers to make things happen. So a fleet manager can be very influential and very important, and they're the ones that really manage the day-to-day when it comes to the goings on of the bus. The service providers are typically the ones that apply for the grants. They're typically very concerned about, they're running businesses, so they don't want to lose money, and they are responsible for making sure that the buses aren't late. So they have a very big role, but the most important reason they usually want to get electric school buses is because they've been told by their Board of Ed, or the Board of Ed has put it in the RFP that they want electric school buses. So, so you can see they're all very intertwined. So once you get your team together, all those people we just talked about, then you do some project planning, and that can involve information about the infrastructure. You make sure that the economics all work out, and then and that includes the grants, and then you move on to procurement. So this is a little bit beyond today's meeting, but there is a process that once you're on the team, then you would be walked through to understand more fully. RFPs are really important. This is how a school district can ensure that their service provider would get electric school buses. It's good to talk with school bus manufacturers to find out the latest and greatest on what's going on with the technology. And we're always trying to figure out how better ways to work with the utilities on these kinds of projects. So in the beginning, everybody is really looking to somebody else, but it's really up to all of us to be leaders. And like geese flying in formation, we go further and faster when we're together. And I know 100% when you get people together with a shared vision and leaders together, all leading together, success is inevitable. And there's nothing that will stop you. Will become unstoppable when you have the team and that shared vision and all of the moral imperative and all the tools and resources that I can give you, and we all do this together, but definitely leads to success. So,
Hi, Daphne, I want to
yes,
ask a question.
absolutely.
And that is because I'm seeing it a lot in the chat. And I
Oh,
think
good.
people may not know that you will be available to be a guide to this process. And we are currently negotiating with graduate students at Yale to be trained by you to be your guide supervisors for different congregations. So nobody has to do this on their own. Daphne is being quite modest about the fact that her nonprofit has had a lot of success at procuring these electric school buses, and she will be there to help your congregation once you decide you want to do that. That's all I want to say.
That was important. So to just to add on to what Melly was saying. So if you're interested in this, the first step would just be to, as you can see here, step one, and thank you for Melly for this clarity on this, is just to see who in your congregation who is interested in this. And then have that person call me. And then we would set up a follow-up meeting, and then I would guide you. And and as Melly said, it's not as if we're saying, you know, go forth and good luck. I would be your guide. And how we like to name this is we call these cohorts. So we would hopefully, we're looking for a cohort of people to go through this process together. And I would be your guide and your leader on how to do this process. And so you wouldn't be going it alone. I would be leading you and providing you resources and tools and skills. And with you, you know, we're geese in flight. It really is like geese flying in formation. So we would all be leading, but I would be helping you, and we'd be doing this together, and I would provide you with everything you would need. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, I think. This was just our last, that's my phone number and my email if anybody wants to note that down or take a screenshot, but I know that you can get that from Terry, but
You
right.
surely can. Courtney actually asked if we could get a copy of your slides to use as a guide. And I think that's totally possible. I'd be happy to send that out. And the other thing is that this is being recorded, and we'll keep it to an hour so that it's a great thing to show in if you have a post worship service adult education hour, you could show this as a starting point, so that hopefully be very helpful. So I also have a question, and I don't know if other people may have the same question. When we're talking about the grants for the buses, how many buses are we talking about? Like, are you talking about how many buses can get switched out for diesel?
Well, the projects range anywhere from typically like 1 bus to 5 bus. So
Okay.
because, you know, they're complicated projects. So 5 is a lot. It's okay some have just been 1 bus, and that's good. That's fine.
Okay. And I mean, when electric charging infrastructure is not, can that get wrapped up into funding as well, or is that something separate?
That's a great question. So in the last grants, I mean, typically the folks who do the funding know that you need the infrastructure. And so I don't know, the EPA hasn't released it yet, but with the VW grants, there was infrastructure was wrapped into it.
Okay, that would
It has
seem
to be. It has to
right.
be.
Exactly. A lot of places don't have a place to charge. And so I know you said this is for another thing, but can you go through some of the funding sources just a little bit, just touch on
Sure.
it? I know that
Yeah.
keeps coming up in the Q&A in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just for folks, just so you know, I will send out her contact information and that sort of thing when I send out the link with the recording. This will go up on IREGen's YouTube channel as all of our webinars are. So I should hopefully have this up by tomorrow. But
So
anyway, sorry.
So the funding. So the biggest opportunity that's coming up is the EPA grant. So originally it was supposed to come out, I don't know, maybe a month ago, but they're really trying to get a lot of feedback from people. But the EPA grant should be coming out end of May, early June, and that is potentially, I don't know yet, but it's going to be a very rich grant. It is going to target it's going to prioritize environmental justice communities, and it's going to provide a lot of opportunity. The best thing we can do is get as many grant applications into EPA as possible. That's the most important thing. We just really want to do that. And because it's coming up, the sooner we get started, the better, because it takes a little while to put the applications together. Even though they're going to give us a couple of months, it's still good to get started. That's EPA. There's DERA, Diesel Emission Reduction Act funding. That comes up usually at the end of the year. That is a lesser grant award. It's like 45% as opposed to, like EPA could be 100. I'm not sure, but the opportunity with the DERA grant, the Diesel Emission Reduction Act grant, the opportunity there is to apply for a grant for a type A bus. So that smaller bus, because those cost a lot less. And the DERA funding, there's examples of other school districts that have been able to use the DERA funding to get a type A bus. And so any school district would hopefully be able to apply for those. And then there's VW funding, and we're not sure what they're going to do again this year, but I can promise you that the more they see an interest in electric school buses, the more willing they will be to offer up more grant opportunities. That's why they offered. So one of the reasons they were so generous with this past funding was because they saw that so many school districts wanted electric school buses. So the more they see that there's interest, the more that they can trust that extending that opportunity is going to be fulfilled upon.
That's great. Nancy Leckerling, co-chair of IREGen's board, had a question. She said, could you give an idea of the timeline to go from start to finish to get even one bus? For example, how long did it take White Plains to get their first buses?
It takes a long time. So it depends how you do from start to finish. So, I mean, from the very start, so from one person having the idea that we want an electric school bus to that bus actually being delivered is probably a couple of years. And part of it is because the lead time to get it can take 9 months for the bus to even get the bus. You have to wait for the grant cycle. So some of these things are beyond your control. Like, so if you're not able to apply for this grant, you can't apply till next year, and
when is the deadline for the EPA grant?
We don't know. They haven't announced it officially yet. My guess from what I've heard, maybe August, but they haven't announced it yet. So it's hard. I really shouldn't even be, it's not my place to say.
Okay, but it's in the world of community. We'd basically need to get going right away if we wanted to have all our ducks in a row to get a grant in by late fall, early September.
Yeah, it's the soonest
deadline.
opportunity. But even the DARE grant, for the DARE grant, it's probably not till December. But the best time to start working on that DARE grant is yesterday.
And how complicated are the grants? I've written some government grants. It's a lot of information.
Well, the good news is that typically the service providers are the ones that write the grants, and there's usually a lot of confusion around the grants. I know when we were talking to a lot of the schools, they're like, we don't have time to write the grants. We don't know it. Well, they don't have to write the grants. The service provider owns the buses. So the service provider has to write the grant. Even with EPA, it might be a little bit different where it has to be the school district applying, but the details have to still be worked out. But it would still, in the end, the service providers have people who help write the grants. They have grant writers, and they can help support that. So they get help from us. Maybe they help. We help them find out information or supporting documents. They have to submit it, and so they're very helpful in that area.
And so, and actually, could you, Leah, I believe, asked, could you give us some information about how much money the the district saves as a result of the electric school buses? Like what is the cost benefit analysis? That'll obviously be a question people have. And how much air pollution is reduced? Obviously, it's not just about money. Like how?
Yeah, well, so every project is completely different. So and the return on investment doesn't typically start until after five years. So if somebody's interested in that kind of that kind of financial information, for real information, to actually have information that's actually helpful to you, I would want to talk with you. We would want to talk about your school district. We would want to talk about who your service provider is, and actually look at your particular project, how many buses, and because it's so individualized, it depends on so many things. There's so many factors. So, in the end, after the 10 years, there should be some sort of cost savings, but you want to remember the most important thing for the school districts is that they just don't want to be paying more than they're already paying the service providers. And it's the service providers that are, the ones that potentially would reap the benefit probably of any, but you want to keep the contract from going up in price.
Right. And so actually, this kind of goes into Bill Simmons' question: is why are the buses 3 times the price of the diesel equivalent? Is the cost expected to fall when more manufacturers get involved?
Yeah, well, we had our national conference on electric school buses last year, and I had leaders of every school bus manufacturer, and I asked all of them that question: when are prices going to fall? And they all said, in a couple of years. Like they all said that the prices will start coming down. So it's the battery. It's the battery cost, and so there's thousands of people every day trying to figure out how to make these batteries cost less, and also it's not just about the cost, but what materials are being used in that battery.
Mm-hmm.
The sources, it's very complicated, but there's thousands of people every day trying to figure that out. So, it's like cell phones. It's like computers. Like, remember the old cell phones? Remember the old computers? So it's technology. Mm-hmm. So the prices will come down. It will take a little while, but there's a lot of pressure on the school bus manufacturers to get the prices down because everybody's saying, hey, get those prices down.
So, and Gene asked, he mentioned that New York City is doing drivetrain replacement on existing buses. So do any of these grants cover retrofits for diesel to electric drivetrains?
That's a question that I think EPA is looking into at that grant. So I know that it works for some schools. I've actually talked to a few school districts about that, and it's kind of a mixed bag on. Not everybody's convinced that that's the best way to go. It's really it's an option for some, but in other cases they think, well, if I take a bus that's already 5 years old and I switch it out and do that, and it lasts for 5 more years, would I just be better off getting an electric bus? So it's a great technology. It is a great technology. And it's an individual choice when it comes to funding. The funding opportunities are, they're not as clear for that, but that gets clarified, and perhaps the CPA grant will cover that. And that would be
Okay, so yeah, we'll find that out when that is released. All right, let me see if there are any other. Ian said, do you have any advice on timing as it concerns the contracts of school districts expiring?
Yeah, that's a great question. They're all great questions. So it's always around that contract expiring. And a lot of people will say, oh, we can't talk about it now because we just signed a contract. Well, yeah, you just signed a contract, but it's only good for, it's going to be up. And so is there a good time to be talking about it? The time to talk about it is always. And the one thing I know is there's, it comes down to relationships. So if you're a school board or a school district and you want these electric school buses, you need to be talking with your service providers and say, we want electric school buses, our contract there's nothing in our contract for it, but are you looking at it? And, could we work something out? I mean, if both parties agree, you can always rewrite the contract if both parties agree, right? The other thing that's a good thing to be looking at is putting language in like if you're going out to bid, so let's say your contract is up in 6 months or whatever, and you're going to be going out, out to bid, putting language in your RFP about electric school buses as an option. So I'm working with an organization, actually it's a national organization, and we're trying to identify like a template RFP language around electric school buses that we could just give to school districts so they could, potentially modify it. But putting language in the RFP is a really good step, an important thing to do.
I was actually just about to ask if there was a template that folks could use to speed the process
but the contract thing is, school districts have contracts ranging from 1 to 5 years. One thing that we heard over and over when we were doing our first toolkit was that the providers were saying, and different people were saying, well, if the return on investment starts at 5 years, that's when you start to, because after 5 years, the diesel buses, they need a lot of work. And that's right when the electric starts, you start seeing the cost benefit for it. But there's a state statute that limits the contract term to 5 years. So when you're signing that contract, the school board is signing the contract with the service provider. There's a state statute that says you can only sign it for 5 years. And we kept hearing, well, we're never going to be able to get this return for investment because service providers may not be willing to get buses if they, after 5 years, that school district could pick another, provider, and then we're kind of stuck. So what we did was we talked with a lot of other people, and Matt Masunas at Connecticut Green Bank actually wrote legislation this during this session. It was HB 92. I think it got rolled into one of the other ones, but it's language that legislation that would allow for a 10-year contract. It would allow for, it wouldn't say you have to, it would allow for, if both parties agreed, to allow for a 10-year contract. Not that you have.
So is that legislation in the session right now?
Yeah.
Which bill did it get rolled into?
It got folded in. How SB4 got very busy?
Yeah.
I think it's in, last I heard, it was in there. It got folded in. It was its own for a while, but I think it got folded in.
And so, folks, I will say just a little bit off topic, but on topic, is the legislative session is still going. It ends on May 4th. And what we're hearing is lots of bills have gotten out of committee with strong support, and lots of them have co-sponsors, which means, they have a good chance of passing the House and the Senate. if they get called. But the problem is a lot of these bills have not been called. They're not being
Right.
put on the calendar. So we need you to call your legislator and ask them to ask for these bills to be called to a vote. What I hear often is people saying, well, I know my representative or my senator, they're definitely going to vote for it. But they actually need to hear from you so they can go to the speaker and say, you need to put this on the calendar for a vote. IREJN has a pretty comprehensive list of the legislative issues that are out there on our website, irejn.org. So please check that out. But just a little sidebar on the legislative session. It is happening and it's ending short. It's a short session this year. So, Bill, actually, might actually be a question for Mally because he just said he wasn't clear what the group of Yale students mentioned earlier were planning to do. He was wondering, is there scope of work to liaison with the service providers or to aid in grant writing or generate positive momentum within the service provider administrations? So
It isn't, Bill, it isn't quite clear yet what role they will play. What we do know is that Daphne has a great history and interest in working with interns, fellows, and we know that there are Yale graduate students who are interested in connecting to this project. She will train them. They will be paired with a congregation that knows that it wants to go forward so that not every question has to go to Daphne. Some of them will be able to be answered by the graduate students, or they will funnel the questions to Daphne, who will decide that she should meet with you in person over Zoom or however you decide to do it. It's in fact being worked out now what those graduate students might help. But I just think it's really fascinating that there is a cohort of young people at Yale who are getting a double degree in both forestry and divinity and have expressed interest in helping with this project. And they will be available to help the congregations.
that's great. That's very exciting.
It is. And I wanted to thank everybody who put your name and your town in the chat. It's really fun to see all the names. I recognize Erin and Jean. I know Jean was in a lot of our toolkits. So, hey, Jean, it's great to see you. He was an amazing participant. And I see we've got somebody from Bridgeport. I know we've been working a lot of effort with Bridgeport. Their service provider is a company called We Transport, and they were just bought by a larger company last year who says that they're interested in electric school buses. We did a demo in Bridgeport, and we've heard that the school board is very interested in electric school buses, yet they did not apply for VW. And we're not quite sure why We Transport didn't apply for VW funding with this, the school board's interested. So we're really looking for some champions in Bridgeport because we already have a lot of momentum there and really would be able to help. We also did do a school bus demo in West Hartford, and that was a lot of fun. And we know that there's a lot of interest and support in West Hartford for electric school buses, and that's potentially, in West Hartford, I could see a DEER grant, potentially in your future, in a Class A bus. So
I have a question. There's so much American Rescue Plan funding right now.
yeah,
Is this a sort of thing that a town could pair with a DEER grant or something like that?
Um, no, because it's both federal money. You can't.
Oh,
Put
okay. So you
money
can't
together.
like
Yeah.
put your money
Okay,
together.
I have a
Okay.
question.
Yes.
Could you take just 2 minutes and describe what you called boot camp? That was a very intriguing idea, and I don't think we actually learned what it would be. If a congregation signed up for boot camp, what would happen next?
So when we have groups sign up for boot camp, it's just we go through a process where we get everybody to kind of know each other, and then we teach you just enough technical information to kind of understand the electric school buses, a little bit about the technology, so you feel you understand a little bit about the technology. We explain the different grants and how that works, and then we work with you to we work to identify who in your town you need to talk to, and then help you facilitate those types of meetings to get the information to the decision makers about the grants. And then at that point, it becomes kind of personalized. This town might need help with their service provider. This town might need help with their school board. This town might need, something else. So, but it's really just to teach you to get your confidence up. A lot of people don't feel like they are going to know what to say to the school board or, how to get things done. So we just take you through, how to do that.
And is a boot camp per town? So you're focused on literally on the people in that town?
Yeah, when we do the boot camps, and we also have presentations that we can give you to give to your school board or your board of ed.
Ooh,
things
nice.
like, so there's that. So when we do the boot camps, we really try to create a cohort of people from a bunch of different towns to start off with and take them through, the technical stuff. And this is what you do, and this is what you need to learn. And we take them through this learning process. But then, as we go, as people learn stuff, still in our group, then individual questions will come up. And what's one of the best things about the cohort too is that we have our teachings, and then what we had done in the past was, we had like weekly teachings, but then we had coaching calls also that were less structured, where people could just call, we would get on a call or a Zoom and people would just ask questions. So if we were in like module 2 and it was about the technical aspects of a school bus, and people had they just wanted to get in nitty-gritty questions, we just have like an hour of coaching and laser coaching on what they needed to know. Or if we had a module on, how do you get the service providers involved, then we might have a coaching session where people say, well, I have first student and they're not doing anything, and what do we do? And helping them like that. So it's a combination of structured learning and then coaching calls.
So what I'm hearing is that the next step for a lot of the people on this call is to get in touch with you and say, we want to be part of the 2022 cohort and we want to go to boot camp.
Boot camp. It's a lot of fun. People have a lot of fun. Oh, and I do want to say, if any of you know about Sustainable Connecticut, we do collaborate with Sustainable Connecticut, and we work it out with them so they know what we're doing. And you get certificates of completion if you do your homework, there's homework. But if you want a certificate of completion, because we know Sustainable Connecticut needs you need to prove that you did stuff, you can get the certificate, and then you don't have to prove yourself to Sustainable Connecticut because your certificate of completion is more than enough to get the points.
You get the points towards funding, towards matching funds too, from Sustainable Connecticut.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful matching funds program for anything to do with environmental work.
You're right.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, that's great. So does anyone, we're at 8 o'clock. Does anyone have any final questions?
Well, I do. My question is, who's going to join me for boot camp? It's so much fun. I hope you all call and email, and I can't wait to hear from every single one of you.
Yes, please do. And honestly, please CC Terry at iregen.org, because I'd like to really be able to support congregations too as they go through this. I think this is a really important role that the faith community can play. And I just want to put my last little slide up before we go, because we have, oh, no, that's not the one. There we go. There are 3 upcoming events in the next 10 days that I just wanted to tell you about before we say goodnight. The climate strike is the Sunrise Movement Climate Strike on Friday, April 22nd. That's this Friday. They're gathering at 2 p.m. with a 3 p.m. rally. They're expecting a lot of youth. We have our next webinar next Monday, April 25th at 7 to 8, and that will be on home energy efficiency and how we can help more folks get through the weatherization programs and be champions for that. And then on Friday, April 29th, we are working with Dayenu and an interfaith group of folks around the state to do a divestment action for Bank of America and Wells Fargo. So got more information on the IREJN website about that. But as always, please call your legislator about environmental legislation. It is critically important. We have a great opportunity this session to get some fantastic bills through, but we do need to stay active until the end. So
Thank you so much.
I wanna really, oh, sorry, Mally?
I just want to say thank you, Daphne. This has been an enormously useful and energizing hour, and I hope everybody on the call is going to follow up and give you a call. And we'll see all of each other in boot camp.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daphne, for taking the time. Thank you, Mally, Ted, and Sabina for your work on this. Thank you, Alba, for providing Spanish interpretation. And thank you to all of our attendees for carving out an hour on Monday after the holidays to join us. I will send out information, follow-up information, a link to the recording, Daphne's contact information in an email following the webinar. Leah, look at irejn.org. I will send that information. I'll send a link out. She's asking what bills should we be calling on. I've got a comprehensive list on our website, and I will send that out as a follow-up as well. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye. See you soon.